In this day and age, many of our movements are recorded on public transport, in stores, and even in the backgrounds of other people's videos. But even though much of our lives are captured on video, there's still no guarantees that if something were to happen, the case would be solved quickly and neatly. Many cases involving video evidence simply leave us more perplexed than ever, as these examples will show. Join us for today's episode as we examine 3 last sightings of missing persons caught on CCTV. Daniel Entwistle. 7-year-old Daniel Entwistle was last seen in the coastal town of Great Yarmouth, England on May 3, 2003. He was seen that afternoon at around 3:30 p.m. playing with a group of boys near the river at Trinity Quay. Several hours later, at around 5:05 p.m., he was spotted on surveillance cameras in Blinko's convenience store, wandering alone through the aisles. He had reportedly been sent to shop on an errand, and upon his return home, he'd asked his father if he could go out and play more on his bike. His father agreed, but told him not to stray too far from the home. But Daniel never returned. In the early hours of the morning, his red bike was discovered near Trinity Quay. The front tire had a puncture, but his father stated that it was not new and he'd tried to fix it previously. There was no sign of the little boy and nothing to indicate how long the bike had lain there on its side. Shortly after it was found, a tent was put over it and the police ramped up their search efforts. In the following hours, police drivers were dispatched into the River Yare. Scent Dog participated in the ground search, and helicopters scoured the area from above. Around 60 uniformed officers joined with lifeboat crews, the Coast Guard and local volunteers, but no trace of the 7-year-old was uncovered. Daniel's mother, Paula, described him as outgoing and pleasant, adding that he could be mischievous like a lot of children, and he's a bit of a loner, but he says hi to anybody. His parents also noted that the little boy had disappeared before, but he'd been found within a few hours. In 2012, his father, David, stated, "I don't know if he's alive. I don't know if he's dead. He could still be alive. Somebody might have taken him. He could have fallen into the river. We just don't know. We've got no closure. I wish I had told him. He couldn't play out. It really hurts." There have been few notable leads in Daniel's case. According to the Norfolk Police, over 2,500 lines of inquiry have been examined in the 2 decades since he disappeared, and investigators have taken over 580 statements. Furthermore, in the last 6 years, searches for Daniel have been carried out in the Greater Yarmouth area, while around 12 new pieces of information have been examined and pursued. While there have been no major leads in the case, speculation has been rampant. Locals began to theorize that Daniel's own father was involved after it was revealed that in 1987, David, who would have been around 25 years old at the time, received a 6-month jail sentence for sexually abusing a 12-year-old girl. Daniel's mother, Paula, dismissed these rumors, but admitted that discovering her husband's record after their son went missing contributed to their decision to divorce. It was also rumored at one point that 2 local sex offenders were responsible for the disappearance. The 2 men, 60-year-old Jim Hall and 49-year-old Anil Venom, who were both mechanics, were found dead in 2009, having killed 30-year-old Derek Tempest. Derek had reportedly demanded cash from the man, in return for him keeping quiet about the abuse he endured at their hands during his childhood, though the pair gave him a total of £1,800. Police theorized that Derek returned for a 3rd payment and was subsequently killed. He was found dead in the River Yare, a hefty vehicle brake drum tied around his waist. The 2 men took their own lives shortly afterwards. A search of their property found no link between them and Daniel. However, in 2023, Paula told the Daily Mail Online that she had come to terms with the idea that her son had fallen into the river as his bike had been found at Trinity Quay next to the River Yare. She believes fast-flowing currents pulled him under and theorized that he'd fallen in after climbing the wall to stand on it. She stated, "It's not a big mystery. The police showed me CCTV of him riding his bike across a garage forecourt toward the quay, and he didn't come out again. Nobody else was shown going towards the quay, so it looks like he was on his own." She added that she thought he'd gone to the garage to buy a Kinder Egg because there weren't any when he'd been at the convenience store earlier. Paula and Daniel's father, David, split up shortly after Daniel vanished. David died in 2015 at the age of 53. Despite the best efforts of the police, Daniel remains missing. He was last seen in Greater Yarmouth, England on May 3, 2003, at the time of his disappearance. He was 7 years old, 3 foot 2 inches tall, and was a thin build. He is described as a white male with light brown hair, cropped short. He was last seen wearing a blue Adidas t-shirt with striped sleeves and an Adidas motif on the chest, blue tracksuit bottoms, and gray trainers. He spent 4 years living in Burnley, Lancashire, and as a result, he had a strong northern accent. If you have any information on Daniel's case, you can contact Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800-555 111 Marion Fowler. 65-year-old Marion Fowler was last seen on December 24, 2002 when she stopped at a strip mall on Louisiana Highway 415, west of Port Allen, Louisiana at around 5:30 p.m. At the time of her disappearance, Marion was on her way to visit her husband, Jerry Fowler, at a federal prison in Beaumont, Texas for Christmas after he'd been sentenced to prison for 5 years, following a bribery and kickback scheme involving voting machines. Marion was last spotted outside of a Subway sandwich shop, which is where investigators believe she was abducted. Shortly after she vanished from the strip mall, her belongings were discovered scattered on the ground outside of the shop, including her false nails, which had likely come off during the struggle with her attacker. Early on, robbery was ruled out as a motive behind crime because her handbag and keys were left behind, and her car was still in the car park with wrapped Christmas gifts sitting in the back seat. Taking a closer look at the surrounding area, investigators discovered that there was a surveillance camera installed inside a liquor store and through it, determined that a black General Motors pickup truck sped away from the shop at around the time that Marianne is believed to have disappeared. Though the suspect was caught on tape, the image was of poor quality and could not be used to identify anybody. A report dated just 2 days after the disappearance observed that volunteers and officers from West Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office were searching for a set of tracks they hoped would lead them to Marianne. A helicopter with infrared sensors was brought in earlier in the search, but had not helped investigators find evidence. Detectives believe tracks must have been left behind at the scene because it had been raining for hours before Marianne vanished, leaving the ground soft and impressionable, as well as searching for tracks. They were also looking for anything that would indicate a scene had recently been disturbed, broken locks on buildings or gates, or even displaced piles of leaves. Nothing of note was ever found. There have been very few leads in the case in years since, but the prime suspect in Marianne's case was the serial killer Derek Todd Lee. Between 1998 and 2003, Lee terrorized Baton Rouge and Lafayette, Louisiana, using the cities and the surrounding areas as his hunting grounds. He killed at least 7 women during this time, but also had a previous criminal record, which included stalking, voyeurism, and trespassing. He was ultimately convicted of the murders of Geraldine DeSoto and Charlotte Murray Pace, though he was linked to 5 more murders and the disappearances of 2 further women, Melinda McGee, a 31-year-old who went missing from her home in 2003, having left behind blood and other signs of violent struggle, and Glenn Tankersley, who vanished December 5, 2002 from Street, Francisville, Louisiana. However, these 2 links are tentative at best. Glenn was an elderly man and thus does not fit the profile of Lee's victims, while Melinda vanished from Alabama, making Lee a weak suspect. At the time of Marianne's disappearance, Lee owned a truck resembling the one that was seen speeding from the scene of her abduction. Furthermore, mobile phone records place him in the area at the time the 65-year-old went missing. But although he was asked about the case following his arrest and conviction for other murders, never admitted to being involved. Unfortunately, he died in 2016 at the age of 47, meaning that answers may never come in Marianne's case. Investigators stated that they had only circumstantial evidence tying Lee to her disappearance, including the mobile phone data, potential match between his truck and the one seen on CCTV. Although investigators never found any of Marianne's DNA in his truck. And the fact that Lee sold the pickup truck shortly after the abduction, around the time that detectives announced they were searching for such a vehicle. In 2003, forensic testing was carried out on Marianne's acrylic nails, with investigators hoping there would be DNA evidence of her attacker between the tips. However, No such evidence was found. This meant that Derek Todd Lee could not be definitively ruled out of case. Upon hearing this news, her only son, John Pritchett, stated, "Really hate to think of my mother having to suffer the way this person committed his crimes. But yet I need to know what happened because eventually I need to move on with my life, and right now I can't." Investigators stated that as time marched on, they had less interest in prosecuting Lee, who was already on death row anyway, and were more interested in bringing Marion's body home for her son and grandchildren. But West Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff Mike Keisers recalled that when Lee was asked about the case, quote, "He would just go nuts. He would like snap when I asked him that." Though Lee remains the strongest suspect in the case, investigators have stated that it is an open case until Marion's body is found. Marion Fowler was 65 when she vanished on Christmas Eve, 2002 from a strip mall near Port Allen, Louisiana. She is described as a white woman with brown, red hair and brown eyes. She is 5 foot 8 inches tall and weighed around 132 pounds at the time of her disappearance. When she went missing, she was wearing a full-length black wool coat, dark gray trousers, a light-colored shirt, diamond jewelry including earrings, a necklace and a ring, and a diamond-encrusted watch. She also wore acrylic nails, several of which came off at the scene of the crime and had scars left over from having a facelift. If she's still alive, she will be 87 years old. Anyone with information about her case can contact the West Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office at 225-343 9-2-3-4 Courtney Lake. Courtney Lake grew up in the small town of St. Lawrence in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. In her late teens, she met Jason Pike, the man who'd become the father of her son, Oliver. But after a 4-year relationship, the two would part ways. Following this, she would meet Philip Smith and the two embark on a tumultuous on-again, off-again relationship, just months before Courtney disappeared. Smith called her mother, despite a no-contact order, and stated that he planned to kill himself. Lisa subsequently called his sister, and while he ended up in hospital, Smith survived the suicide attempt. Lisa recalled, "If I had ignored that phone call, or if I hadn't called his sister, Courtney would be here and Philip wouldn't. I got so much guilt built up over that." Courtney was last seen on June 7, 2017. Just before 8 p.m. when she climbed into the passenger side of Smith's black pickup truck. At the time, Courtney, 24, was broken up with Smith, 25, but he still had some of her belongings, specifically a set of Christmas ornaments. An article from CBC News noted that the last time Courtney had gone to collect her things from Smith's house, he'd box up her possessions and set them on fire in his front garden. Everything was burned except those missing Christmas ornaments. According to her mother, Lisa Lay, quote, "He sent her a message and said, 'If you want your Christmas stuff, I will come and get you. You come to my house, we'll go through it, and I will bring you back.'" It was this text message that led Courtney to climb into his truck on June 7th with dash cam footage from another vehicle showing her waiting on the pavement of Michener Avenue in Mount Pearl before entering the truck as it pulled up next to her. She has never been seen again, and all activity on her phone and social media stopped at this time. Notably, Smith had recently been in court where he had pleaded guilty to assaulting Courtney, distributing intimate images of her and breaching prior orders to stay away from her and her mother, but he was released from police custody that afternoon. He returned to court 2 days after she disappeared for once more violating a court order to stay away from his ex-girlfriend. In the months following Courtney's disappearance, on November 1, 2017, Lisa was awoken by the sound of someone knocking heavily at her front door. When she opened it, she found 2 police detectives who told her that Smith was dead. He had taken his own life near a cabin in a wooded area in Bellevue and left no notes behind. His body was found by the RCMP after his family alerted the police to tell them he had called them to say he was going to kill himself. Although investigators secured the nearby area, thinking that perhaps Courtney's body had been buried there, they found no trace of the missing 24-year-old. Initially, following Smith's death, the grief of Courtney's family was renewed. The one person they believed could give them answers was now no longer able to. However, in the years since, the police have stated their belief that there are people who know more than they're letting on, and that they are purposely withholding information. Investigators observe that the more than 100 people interviewed is part of the case. Some gave contradicting statements in a bid to cover for Smith. Their statements could be disproved by evidence such as photos and videos. Lisa stated, "There have been no major updates in Courtney's case in a year since." In 2022, her ex-boyfriend Jason Pike made headlines when he became the victim of several arson attempts after 2 of his vehicles, along with motorbike, were set on fire. He stated that he believes he is being targeted by people who think he had something to do with Courtney's disappearance. Courtney's case is still unsolved. She was last seen on June 7, 2017, climbing into a black GMC pickup truck on Michener Avenue in Mount Pearl, Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. She is described as a white woman with brown hair and brown eyes. She is 5'8" and weighed between 110 and 120 pounds at the time of her disappearance. She was last seen wearing gray and white Nike trainers and a gray, white, and pink hooded jacket. Anyone with information about her disappearance can contact Crime Stoppers at 1-800-222-8477. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and speculations. And remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.